Priya Sharma was standing at the Family Feud podium on March 7, 2022, when Steve Harvey asked her a simple survey question. Name something your husband does that drives you crazy. Priya looked directly into the camera, smiled, and said 8 words that made Steve Harvey physically fall backward off the edge of the stage. He died 2 years ago. I still talk to him. Steve's left foot missed the platform, his body tilted. 2 stagehands lunged and caught him by the arms before he hit the studio floor. The audience gasped. Steve's cue cards scattered across the ground. And when Steve climbed back onto that stage 4 minutes later, what Priya Sharma told him about her dead husband would break every rule Family Feud had ever established, generate 320 million views in 6 days, and build a network of grief support centers that now operates in 44 states. It was March 7, 2022, in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Sharma family had flown in from Edison, New Jersey. Priya, 36, was a pediatric nurse who worked the overnight shift at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. Her team consisted of her mother Sunita, her sister Meera, her brother-in-law Raj, and her 12-year-old daughter Kavya, who had been granted special permission to compete because Family Feud requires adult contestants. But Steve's team had made an exception after reading the application. The competing family, the Buchanans from Memphis, Tennessee, had competed on game shows before. They'd been on Wheel of Fortune in 2019. They wore matching navy blazers and radiated the easy confidence of people who had done this before. Priya's family stood in a cluster near the stage entrance. Priya kept touching a thin gold chain around her neck. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Priya met Arjun Sharma during their freshman year at Rutgers University in 2004. He was studying mechanical engineering. She was pre-nursing. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours and took place on a bench outside the library in October. And 18 years later, Priya could still tell you what he was wearing: a gray Rutgers hoodie with a coffee stain on the left sleeve. They married in 2009. Kavya was born in 2010. Arjun took a job at an aerospace firm in Princeton. He made good money. They bought a house with a small backyard and a maple tree that dropped leaves into the gutter every November. And every November, Arjun cleaned those gutters while singing Bollywood songs badly and loudly enough that the neighbors could hear. In September 2019, Arjun started coughing. Not a cold cough, a cough that came from somewhere deep and wouldn't stop. The first doctor said allergies. The second doctor ordered a chest X-ray and went quiet when it came back. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The oncologist used the word aggressive 4 times in a 7-minute conversation. Arjun was 34 years old. The treatment plan was a combination of chemotherapy and a targeted radiation protocol that Arjun's oncologist believed offered the strongest chance of shrinking the tumor before surgical intervention. The total estimated cost was $211,000. Their insurance approved the chemotherapy, but denied the radiation protocol. The denial letter stated the treatment was not consistent with standard care guidelines for the patient's demographic profile. Priya called the insurance company and asked what that meant. The representative said she couldn't elaborate beyond what the letter stated. Priya filed an appeal. It was denied in 9 days. She filed a second appeal with letters from 3 oncologists. Denied in 14 days. The language was identical each time, as though someone had pressed a button and printed the same paragraph on fresh paper. Arjun told Priya not to fight it. He said they would figure something out. What he didn't tell her was that he had already done the math. Without the radiation protocol, The chemotherapy alone gave him a 14% chance of surviving 2 years. He kept that number in his head and never said it out loud. He read Kavya a bedtime story every single night. He never missed one. Even during chemo weeks, when the nausea was so bad he had to hold a bucket between his knees, he sat on the edge of Kavya's bed and read. Kavya was 9 years old, and she knew something was wrong because her father had started reading slower, as if he were trying to memorize every page. Priya took extra shifts. She was already working 4 overnight shifts a week. She added a 5th, then a 6th. She slept 3 hours a day. She sold her jewelry. She sold the second car. She started a GoFundMe that raised $11,000 from friends and family and co-workers. She was $163,000 short. She called the insurance company 19 more times. Each call was between 12 and 45 minutes. Each call ended the same way. Denied. Arjun died on January 4, 2020. He was 35 years old. He never received the radiation treatment. The last bedtime story he read to Kavya was Charlotte's Web. He didn't finish it. He read up to the part where Charlotte tells Wilbur she won't be coming back to the fair. And then he closed the book and said, "We'll finish tomorrow." There was no tomorrow. After the funeral, Priya found a notebook in Arjun's desk drawer. He had written letters to Kavya, not for birthdays, not for milestones. He had written letters for ordinary days. There was a letter labeled, "For when you lose your first tooth at school and I'm not there." There was a letter labeled, "For the first time someone is mean to you on the bus." There was one labeled, "For a random Tuesday when you feel sad and don't know why." There were 63 letters in total. Arjun had written them during chemo sessions, in the waiting rooms, in the car, in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, when Priya thought he was sleeping. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Priya didn't stop talking to Arjun after he died. Every night, after her shift at the hospital, she would come home at 6:30 in the morning, sit on his side of the bed, and talk to him. She told him about her day. She told him about Kavya's grades. She told him when the maple tree dropped its leaves, and she cleaned the gutters herself for the first time. She told him she was angry at him for dying, and then apologized for being angry. She did this every single morning for 2 years. Kavya heard her mother talking through the bedroom wall. One night, Kavya walked into the room and found Priya sitting on the bed, holding Arjun's gray Rutgers hoodie with the coffee stain on the left sleeve. And Kavya said, "Mama, is Daddy talking back yet?" Priya applied to Family Feud because Arjun had always wanted to be on a game show. It was on his bucket list. He had written it in a journal that Priya found after his death, right between "Learn to Surf" and "Take Kavya to See Snow." Priya didn't apply to win money. She applied because she wanted to stand on a stage her husband had dreamed of standing on and feel him next to her one more time. Steve Harvey would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. When Steve asked the question about husbands, the producers expected a funny answer. That's what the category was designed for. Lighthearted, playful. Something about leaving socks on the floor or hogging the remote. When Priya said, "He died 2 years ago. I still talk to him," the studio fell completely silent. 240 people. No sound. Steve stumbled backward, missed the stage edge, and fell. The stagehands caught him. He climbed back up. He didn't go back to the podium. He walked directly to Priya. He asked her to tell him about Arjun. Priya talked for 11 minutes. She told Steve about the Rutgers hoodie, about the gutter singing, about the 63 letters in the desk drawer, about the bedtime stories and Charlotte's Web, and the page he never turned. She told him about the insurance denials and the 14% number that Arjun kept in his head, and the GoFundMe that fell $163,000 short. When she said the part about talking to Arjun every morning on his side of the bed, Steve's jaw locked. His hands gripped the edges of his cue cards until the paper bent. The studio fell completely silent does not describe what happened. It was beyond silence. It was the sound of 240 people holding their breath at the same time. Then Kavya, 12 years old, sitting in the front row of the audience, stood up. She wasn't prompted. Nobody called her name. She walked to the edge of the stage, looked up at Steve Harvey and said, "Mr. Steve, can you tell my mom it's okay to stop being sad?" Steve dropped his cue cards. He didn't pick them up. He stepped off the stage, knelt in front of Kavya, and said nothing for almost 20 seconds. Then he turned to his producers. "Stop the taping." The lead producer pointed at her watch. Steve didn't look at her. He said, "I said stop it, right now." In 46 years of Family Feud production, no host had ever halted a taping for a personal conversation with a contestant's child. Steve didn't care. But Steve wasn't done. He brought Priya and Kavya to center stage. He asked Priya about the letters. She told him. 63 letters for ordinary days. Steve asked if she had one with her. She did. She always carried one in her purse. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Steve. It was labeled, "For the day someone asks you about me and you don't know what to say." Steve read it silently. His lips moved, but no sound came out. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully, handed it back to Priya, and said 5 words that would be seen by 320 million people. He's still reading to her. The studio fell completely silent for the 4th time. But Steve wasn't done. He walked to the edge of the stage, pulled out his phone, and called Oprah Winfrey live on stage. He explained Priya's story in 90 seconds. Oprah's voice came through the speaker and she asked one question. How many other families lost someone because insurance denied their treatment? Steve looked at Priya. Priya said she didn't know. Oprah said, "Then let's find out, and let's make sure it stops." Oprah pledged $250,000 on that phone call to establish a fund that would cover denied treatment costs for families who had exhausted their appeals. Steve turned to the Buchanan family. The family in the matching navy blazers. Jim Buchanan, the father, was crying openly. His wife Angela had her arm around their youngest son. Steve asked the question. The same question he had asked the Delgados. Would they forfeit their winnings for the Sharma family? Jim Buchanan didn't hesitate. He said, "Sir, we came here to win money. We're leaving with something better." Steve turned back to Priya. He put his hand on her shoulder. "Let me tell you something. You think you're alone in that bedroom at 6:30 in the morning, talking to a man who's not there. You think nobody understands what it feels like to keep a conversation going with someone who can't answer." Steve paused. He looked at the floor. "When I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo, sleeping in parking lots, showering in gas station bathrooms, I used to talk to my mother. She'd been dead for 5 years. I talked to her every night in that car because she was the only person who ever believed I'd be something. And I'm standing here today because I never stopped talking to her." Steve looked directly at Priya. "Because 26 years ago, I was you. Don't you ever stop talking to him. He hears you." Steve turned to the camera. He looked into the lens and said, "Everyone watching at home, if you still talk to someone who's gone, if you still set a place at the table, or save their side of the bed, or clean the gutters and sing their song, that's not grief. That's love refusing to end. And there's nothing crazy about it. He announced that both families would receive the full prize. The Sharma family received $25,000. The Buchanan family received the same. Angela Buchanan crossed the stage and hugged Priya so hard that Priya's knees buckled. Kavya stood between her mother and Jim Buchanan, who knelt down and told her that her daddy would be very proud. The episode aired on March 15, 2022. The clip hit YouTube the same night. Within 48 hours, it had 140 million views. Within 6 days, 320 million. The hashtag "Still Talking to Him" trended in 53 countries for 11 days. Grief counselors across the country reported a 400% increase in calls from people who said they saw the clip and finally felt permission to talk about the person they'd lost. 61 insurance companies received formal inquiries from state regulators about treatment denial practices in the month following the broadcast. In June 2022, Steve Harvey and Oprah Winfrey co-launched the 63 Letters Foundation, named after the number of letters Arjun wrote to Kavya for ordinary days. The foundation's dual mission was to cover treatment costs denied by insurance companies and to fund grief support centers for families who lost loved ones to medical system failures. In its first 3 years, the 63 Letters Foundation raised $18.2 million, established grief centers in 44 states, and directly funded denied treatments for over 3,000 families. Priya was interviewed by The Today Show 4 months after the episode aired. The host asked her if she still talked to Arjun. Priya smiled and said, "Every morning, I tell him about the foundation now. I tell him about the families we're helping. I think he would have liked that." Kavya finished Charlotte's Web on her own. She read the last chapter sitting on her father's side of the bed while Priya sat next to her. When Charlotte dies in the book and Wilbur is left alone, Kavya closed the cover, held it against her chest and said, "He knew. That's why he stopped there. He knew." Steve Harvey told People magazine in an interview 6 months later, "I have fallen off a lot of stages in my career. I have tripped. I have stumbled. I have embarrassed myself in front of millions of people. But the only time I ever truly fell was the day a woman told me she still talks to her husband every morning, and her 12-year-old daughter asked me to tell her mother it was okay to stop being sad. That's the fall I never recovered from, and I don't want to." In Edison, New Jersey, there is a house with a small backyard and a maple tree that drops its leaves every November. A woman cleans those gutters now. She doesn't sing while she does it, but she hums, quietly, the same Bollywood song her husband used to shout at full volume. Inside the house, hanging on the wall next to 63 framed letters and a child's drawing of a family of 3 standing under a tree, is a gray Rutgers hoodie with a coffee stain on the left sleeve. It has never been washed. The stain is still there, so is he. People spend their lives afraid of grief, as if loving someone who is gone makes you broken. But everyone who watched Priya Sharma stand on that stage and say she still talks to her husband understood something they will carry forever. Love doesn't require a pulse. It only requires someone brave enough to keep the conversation going. If this story reminded you that love doesn't stop at goodbye, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we share moments from Family Feud that changed lives and changed the people watching. Stories about what happens when someone stands in front of a stranger and says the truest thing they've ever said. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and send this to someone who still talks to the person they lost. They need to know they're not alone.